Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby with Christopher Gattelli, the choreographer from Schmigadoon. And season two of this show brings us into Chicago, paying homage to these musicals of the 60s and 70s. You danced in Fosse on Broadway, so you have some
Yes.
experience with a lot of this type of material. Did you have sort of an immediate sense of what it needed to feel like these dances? Did you call upon that history?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, when I first heard that this was the direction it was going, and then got the scripts and songs, I was in heaven. They're so much fun to perform. So I knew it was going to be a really fun process.
Yeah. Was there anything from that prior Broadway show that you thought, oh, that would be a good thing to incorporate here?
I mean, well, it was amazing, especially that it was Fosse and it was kind of like the greatest hits, and it wasn't just one of the shows in particular.
Mhm.
It actually helped my brain a lot in terms of, I keep thinking of the term farrago that's in the opening number, and it means literally mashup, and so it was really helpful because I felt like I had so much of his vocabulary in my body, not just even like Sweet Charity and some other specific shows at the time, but just other like Liza with a Z concert and other things that had happened in the 60s and 70s, that it was like, oh, and that was a great move, and that was a great, so it was kind of really nice to have so much in kind of just the data bank in my brain. So that was really helpful and fun.
Yeah. And I was thinking of that opening number, which is very Fosse, very Pippin. What is it like when there is a song that is clearly taking inspiration and saying, we're doing our version of this classic song, Magic to Do? How do you kind of toe the line between paying homage and making it into something of your own?
I mean, to be honest, it's kind of that Farrago. It was kind of like, okay, well, it's not, I mean, it said in the script, literally like 20 pairs of white jazz hands are floating in the air. When I saw that in the script, I was like, oh no, we're starting here. Amazing. But then it was like, but then doing the number, like, yes, there are the jazz hands, and that's just, a given. But then it was fun to kind of like even incorporate moments of like, chorus line references and
Mhm.
Chicago references, things that I knew were going to foreshadow the language of the season, because I wanted to make sure it was Fosse because to honor that number, but also kind of like bits of other 60s and 70s choreographers and styles and things like that in there. So we kind of like laid out like a ground plan of like, oh, this might happen too, coming up in the season. So it was fun to put all of that in a blender for the opening, again with the
Yeah.
visuals. But I mean,
Well, it's such a complete 180 from what you did for season one with the Golden Age type musicals. Was there anything from that first season that kind of survived that carried over, or did you really have to kind of start from scratch?
well, I mean, what was such another exciting part of this for at least me and my department was doing what you just said, like taking, like, especially in the opening number, the whole idea that Josh and Melissa are like, are we here? Like,
Mm.
that is the mayor, it's not the mayor. So to kind of keep them off balance, like I tried to, it's very subtle, and if people get it, they get it, and if not, not. But like even like the welcome to, like, just the arm lifts and like the little head pop,
Mhm.
it's kind of like that. I did that in the opening number of the first season. So I was like, if people catch that, great. Like Josh and Melissa might catch that maybe. But even the first two dancers that are revealed, Daniel and Erica, like they were like center-ish too. So it's kind of like, wait, they look familiar. So even like plotting like where the dancers were placed and things like that to kind of throw Josh and Melissa off a bit. It was really fun to kind of thread that through all of the numbers as well when I could, when it made sense to go back. It was so nice to be able to reference that.
Yeah. Well, I think one of my favorite ones is my favorite numbers is Kaput, where Dove Cameron does a really wonderful Minaire send up. How difficult is it to incorporate chairs into it? Because I know she said that was quite a workout for her.
It was I mean, it was so what one of my favorite parts about this season was I really didn't get to work with Dub the first season.
Mhm.
She didn't have like, she was in numbers, and she was definitely had like a major part with Keegan, but I didn't have a number with her. So I was so happy to get to to really get to know her better this year and work with her. And she just, her work ethic, and I mean, she's one of the loveliest people on earth, but her work ethic, it was like, okay, the script says like, and she does amazing things with the chair. And so we came up with a bunch of ideas, but there were things that she was like, oh no, I'll get it. Like she literally worked herself into a split for that number. We were just messing around on the previs while we were sending it, like, oh, here's some things, like spinning the chair with no hands and things like that. And, just some, hopefully funny, ideas and whatnot. But in the previs, we had like a girl sitting on a split in between the two chairs. And she's like, oh, I want to do that. And I was like, okay. She's like, I can't really do a split yet, but she's like, I'll get it. And I was like, oh my gosh, really? And literally in the month and a half we were there, she worked herself into a split. I mean, Dove has her work ethic is just beyond to me. I mean, she really killed that number. I mean, on a dime. I mean, you could see it. It's really difficult to do, like to balance on a chair in heels with one foot on, like the weight balance, the proportion, all of that is she made it look so easy. You wouldn't think it's that hard, but it's really tough. So I was really, really happy and proud of that, how that turned out for her.
That number, it really exemplifies, to me anyway, kind of a major difference between Golden Age musicals, especially in the movies. They're shot with a lot of big wide angles, getting the full body on frame. But like when Fosse made Cabaret, it's not that at all. The camera's behind things, there's interesting angles, there's zooming in on specific moments. How does that style, like, how did that make you think about your choreography and how to structure it?
To be honest, that was one of the things that excited me most about this season, because I specifically, like, I wanted to, of course, pay homage with the choreography, but I also wanted to pay homage with the camera angles and the shots. And because, yeah, the Golden Age it was kind of like we want head to toe, as long of takes as we can, which I also love. But also, when you do a deep dive into the 60s and 70s, it was really Fosse really pushed that forward in terms of like like isolating on a finger snap or a little heel flex, or all of that was so specifically him, and the shots that he kind of envisioned and captured. And so a lot of the season, mostly in the numbers that reference his work especially, but I really wanted to not only pay homage to the choreography, but also the amazing camera angles, like kaput specifically, shock you specifically, and talk to daddy too. Like there were some, even more so, a lot of people reference Frug, but even more so Rhythm of Life. Like he really, in Sweet Charity, some of those shots are they're just brilliant shots, and it was like, so just to even incorporate some of that into the numbers, just to pay homage to that kind of groundbreaking work, I was really, really excited about that.
Yeah. And I think with those, it's tricky sometimes doing an homage, because you don't want to like make fun of something. It has to be a very joyful expression of it. Was that ever a difficult thing for you in these moments?
It wasn't. I mean, I think that I was, because I try to lead with story, so it's like I never wanted to wink at anything, and I never wanted to, but I feel like if what we were paying homage to was rooted in like continuing the story, and that it wasn't, like, for example, like a moment comes to mind, which is one of my favorites, is when we were doing the chorus line section, and Cecily does the quote from Music in the Mirror, like, and she's like hitting the dancers and knocking them down and all of that. Like that was such a fun one to kind of crack / come up with, because it's funny for us that know that moment, and the end of but at the end of the day, like at the end of Music in the Mirror, it's like it's desperation, she's fighting, it's like at the end of that number, and it was like, and that's what Cecily's character is doing. She's like, it's desperation, she wants that job so she can get her husband out of jail. And so it's like, when it was able to work on both levels like that, I think that's when it really succeeds in terms of like not being jokey and winky, that it's like it absolutely is homage, and kind of, and hopefully, again, telling story underneath it and all that good stuff. So it's kind of always leading with that when I could.
You also made an incredible dance for Jane Krakowski with Bells and Whistles, which is like a mashup of Chicago and company, and it's really amazing, and a chorus line. What is it like? How does your process differ when you're structuring something like for a specific person to show off their skill set?
It was, well, it was great, like at least knowing Jane. I've worked with her a couple times now, so I knew a lot of her strengths, which was helpful. But then, when I'm working, especially with something that specific and as like a, so it's definitely a collaboration with that artist. And Jane, like playing to a lot of her strengths and knowing strengths, but also, you know, it's a great dialogue. Like for example, like, I mentioned, I it was in the script because Cinco also knows, like some of that was in the script, like, she'll roller skate because we all, know Jane can roller skate, but then I was like, but what if you're Lady Justice and you're going across, with the scales and the blind? She was like, we're doing it, so it was a really fun collaboration because it was kind of like we just kept like, but what if, and it was really fun to just, and then what was so beautiful about this period and not having to do it in one long take and whatnot, like we were able to do the dance break and just come up with like some of the just really funny visuals, and her on the trapeze, and the ventriloquist drinking water, and all of that, and just be able to do flashes of these amazing fun moments that build to the Married Today moment. So it was so much fun to create. I mean, with the whole team, it was such a blast, and I'm so happy it turned out that way, uh, for her, because it's just, she really worked her butt off for that. I mean, in terms of like
Yeah.
even learning how to do the trapeze. I mean, she it was really fun to watch her go through that process.
Well, she's lowered onto a playing space before from nine, so
Yes,
she has some
exactly.
experience. Yeah. Is there anything in those moments when you're creating that gets like left on the cutting room floor, or is it really, does everything kind of make it in that you come up with?
Sometimes, I mean, I have to say this season, like having gone through the first, there were like a little more on the cutting room floor, but this one, like getting to know Cinco and his taste, and and how, it has to be efficient but pack it in, like there wasn't much this time that was left on the cutting room floor, because we went in with such a plan, and time on TV is tight, so in terms of like the setups and things like that, so we were really efficient about that. So it was pretty close to a lot of what we went in with, which I was really happy about, because yeah.
Well, I remember talking to you in season one, you were discussing the COVID protocols that made rehearsing quite a challenge. Like you weren't even able to put the stuff on the entire ensemble at times.
Mhm.
I imagine this season, I hope it felt more like a luxury, like a normal rehearsal process. Was it very different?
It did. It was, I mean, there were some COVID procedures in place, but it was definitely a lot easier. And I think, and that was such a kind of shot out of a cannon kind of feeling, where this was at least, okay, we know going in that this is going to be a part of it. And maybe not as intense, but we definitely knew. So we really made sure to kind of go in with that information, and going in with that made it even feel more like a luxury when things were lifted more and more. So it was really, really nice to have that for sure. And to see everyone's faces before before I saw them in the studio. So it was really nice.
Yeah. Who would have thought, just being thankful for seeing faces after all that
Yeah,
time, right?
yeah.
Um,
Something so simple.
well, you received an Emmy nomination, your first ever Emmy nomination for season one. Uh, do you have a favorite memory from that Emmys experience?
Oh, to be honest, just the whole experience was thrilling. I mean, it was a new community for me. So I mean, so to be there in that room with like, that community, it was like, oh my God, it was like starstruck on a whole different level. I mean, you're, looking across the different tables, and it was like, oh my God. But just to, again, to have it be my first TV series, and to be there among all of my peers, and that community, was really just, and it was a true honor. Just, you know, I know it sounds, trite, but it really, really was. And to know to know how much dance is on TV now. It's such a great time, I feel, for dance in general and for our industry and, across the boards. But but especially for TV, like you really see every show has some kind of musical moment in it almost like, and I love that in the different ways we can all kind of serve the shows we're working on and give it that lift. And so I'm really, really excited. And yeah, that was a really special time.
Um, well, I'm personally hoping that Cinco keeps this going for a while with some more different seasons. Is there a like particular musical or era that you like have on your wish list that you're like, next time let's do this?
Oh my gosh. Well, what's really fun is now, if we go on, and now it would probably naturally go into shows that like I've actually been in and performed in it. So now we're getting into that territory where it's like, they're getting into the 80s and 90s. And it's like, oh boy, I've actually been in those shows. And so I think it's going to be really fun to, for me and my team, just to like, oh God, things we probably made fun of on stage doing them, we can get out now. But it was, yeah, I mean, if things continue and we do kind of keep going in that direction, yeah, there's so many I'd love to get my mitts on.
You can have a whole meta moment and go through your Broadway career.
Well, there was a bit of I actually did make fun of myself in this season. I worked on an off-Broadway show called Silence the Musical, which was it's a comedy. It was a parody of Silence of the Lambs.
Mhm.
And when we I think it's episode 2 or 3. No, it's 3. When they do the parable of the lamb, we actually put the lambs in socks on their arms and hoof, so I was like, what, I'm not above making fun of myself and paying homage. So I was like, it's going in. So it was really fun to like have that, just for the cast, like the cast, as soon as it like members from the cast, the original cast kind of like were texting like, no, you didn't do that. I was like, so it's really fun to be able to do that now.
I'm going to go back and watch that number with that in mind now. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining me. It was a wonderful job in season 2 of Schmigadoon. If you're out there watching, subscribe to Cold Derby, stick with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great to see you again.